Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Winners in Business podcast, sponsored by Beachfront Custom Technologies. I'm your host, Andrew Rosenblum. Our guest today is Jonathan Harber. He's the Senior Vice President of Business and Technology Systems, as well as the Chief Information Security Officer at HemaSource. Jonathan graduated from the United States Naval Academy and earned an MBA from West Texas A&M University. After serving 11 years in the Marine Corps, he gained wide-ranging experience in the private sector and went on to successfully guide the technology initiatives for a host of organizations across various industries. He's also worked extensively with nonprofits for a number of causes. Jonathan appeared in Computer World Magazine's Premier 100 IT Leaders and is the two-time winner of the Arizona Technology Council CIO of the Year Award. Let's jump in. Jonathan, I just gave our listeners a bit of a background on you, but I'd like to turn it over to you and hear about your journey in your own words. So I'll let you take it away. Can you tell us a bit about how we got here today?
Well, so oddly enough, we got here where we are today quite by accident. I was in the Marine Corps and I was doing what we call direct action, which was forward activities in military operations. And the then commandant of the Marine Corps, a gentleman named General Al Gray, decided we had too many people who were working on what he called redundant administrative functions. And we needed to have more warfighters. And he had the vision to say the way to solve that problem is with automation. We shouldn't have people doing individual redundant administrative tasks. We should have machines doing that. The statement that he cloned at the time was people should think computers should work. And so anybody with a technical background, engineering, computer science, basic technical studies, was removed from what they were doing, especially if they were in something like infantry, tanks, artillery, and they were drafted into IT. And people were sent there in the officer ranks, everybody from second lieutenants all the way up to lieutenant colonels.
Oh, wow.
And so they're like, you're good at 24 computer languages and you do some of that on the side. You're going from where you were and you're going to now be a data systems or IT officer. Oh, and by the way, if you understand radios and radio waves and that kind of thing, you'll also be in telecommunications. And I was like at the time, well, I like what I'm doing. And they're like, well, we didn't ask. So we got moved over and put into this because of all the reasons that I mentioned. And that's how I got started. As it happens, I luckily had some background in it and found that although I was a bit resistant in the beginning, that understood it, even though it's incredibly complicated and complex, and liked it and liked doing it, and was able to be effective. And so when I left the Marine Corps to join the corporate sector, that was a benefit. Not a lot of call for infantry officers in the corporate sector. They're pilots, yes. Artillery officers, no. You know what I mean? Finance people, yes. I haven't seen
those on Indeed. I don't see those postings a whole lot.
Yeah, scout snipers, no, not really. There is some call for that kind of work in the corporate sector, but it's not for nice people or in nice places. Somewhat the hand of God, because when I decided to leave the Marine Corps, there was a career there.
Well, thank you for your service, by the way. 11 years, right?
Thank you for saying something.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. 11 years, right?
Yes.
Okay, wow. Well, that's incredible. And that sort of leadership in the military, how common is that for them to be forward thinking and saying, hey, we need to be implementing automation so computers are working and humans are thinking?
So I think you'll find it to be much more common than the average bear believes it would be. And people who have never had any experience with the military have opinions like, oh, everybody in the military is so dogmatic and everybody in the military is so inflexible. And I would suggest exactly the other way around, because how many people in the corporate sector are required to change jobs every 3 years and possibly move their family to someplace they've never been, where they don't know anybody, and be assigned in a job that they have background in a place or doing something for an organization with whom they've never had experience before, and do that every 3 years, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
And so the other example I would give you is the D-Day invasion put tens of thousands of ships 1 million men on the beach in a foreign country across the pond and managed to keep them supplied, fed, full of fuel, have places to stay and shelter on another continent and maintain that for a long time. How many corporate operations have ever done anything even remotely resembling that? None. In the history of the world, never. The Romans were as close to that, but that was all military too, right? And then build the roads and rebuild the infrastructure that was destroyed because of World War II to make Western Europe one of the most profitable and prosperous sections of the world ever since then, which one could argue its prosperity was inhibited by the fact that the Western European continent and some of the Eastern European countries had kind of been at war with each other since forever.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I mean,
plus Big Holstein was always a big point of contention.
Right. And you look at the Middle East, which is still at war with itself, has been at war with itself since at least that we can count 13,000 years before the birth of Christ.
Wow. Yeah.
And ever since, the only time it wasn't at war with each other was when it was occupied by the Romans or some other empire. And there were many empires that occupied the Middle East. It was the only time that prospered. So,
not so dogmatic.
I would suggest,
you got to be very responsive. If you're doing something like
to be responsive, have to be flexible, have to be willing to learn new stuff all the time, have to come up with ideas to solve problems that are different here than they were there that probably nobody's ever seen before. Unless you're learning a new aircraft, a pilot flies the same aircraft and does the same thing everywhere he or she goes. But someone who's in charge of a big ship, while they have process and procedures they have to follow, the weather's always changing. The currents and the tides are always changing. The people you're working with and the formation of your, call it a flotilla for lack of a better word, is always changing. So I would suggest that taking on unknown things and being flexible, thinking laterally, some people call that thinking outside the box. I don't like that expression because I think it's overused. Some people only think this way to say, well, why not? Maybe we should go. Can't see the camera. Maybe we should go over there, or maybe we should go over here, or whatever the case is. So I think the military gave a lot of that. And you're required in the military to sometimes sit and listen to a lot of things you may really disagree with. But that's what you sign up for. Whereas sometimes I think in the corporate sector, it's hard to get a lot of things done because everybody has an opinion, and all of those opinions have to be considered. And some companies I've seen get bogged down in that.
So you have this sort of executive mindset, or I guess a more proactive mindset about, hey, everyone's got their own opinion, but we have to actually make this happen.
Yeah, and you want to hear what people have to say because you may miss something if you don't, right? But at the end of the day, somebody has to make the decision and take the input and answer the questions. You want to make sure people can ask all their questions, like I said before, so you don't miss something. But at the end of the day, if you have 4 paths that are equal, somebody has to decide the best path. And it should be based on, on business benefit, technical feasibility, cost, several business factors, but somebody has to make that decision.
Based on your role as a cybersecurity professional, it's not always easy to translate those sorts of outcomes for the rest of your executive team. How do you make sure that everyone else is on the same page and forward thinking, even if what you're suggesting may not affect next quarter's P&L?
There are multiple ways that one can socialize that and sell that to peers and boards. One way is to show, this is one of my favorites, I would say, is to go out into the market, and if you need to plug this hole, show where this hole has been exploited previously and how much that's cost the company.
Oh, Okay.
So if we've had 10 companies have been breached because they don't have endpoint detection and response, for example, right? And the average loss for those 10 companies was $5 million. I'm just making round numbers.
Yeah.
But the high was 16. So that's one. In my current company, we were really lucky when I said, so we fish everybody every other week. And we conduct quarterly cybersecurity training that everybody's required to take. 4 or 5 years ago, before I got here, somebody did succumb to a phishing attack and changed the account that we were paying one of our big suppliers, and we paid $4 million to somebody who was not.
Oh, this wasn't like a test. This was actually something that happened.
Yeah. Somebody conned one of our employees into changing the bank account information for one of our suppliers through phishing. And so they didn't get breached. It was social engineering. And we sent money. Recently, we had a false flag operation run against our controller that looked like a conversation that they had with our CFO. Right? So, giving examples of those kinds of losses is very effective for convincing executive teams and boards of directors.
And that's why they bring you on, obviously.
And if you say, especially when it comes to spending money, in the world, I have a lecture I give to people. It's called Basic Cybersecurity Hygiene. I've given it to a number of conferences. Is that we spend a lot of money trying to keep people out. 87% of the security spend in the United States is spent trying to keep people out. And what does that mean? It means
say again. Trying to keep people
out.
Gotcha.
Out. And that means that we have to be right all the time. And the bad guy only has to be right once. If they can get in.
My goodness.
We don't make it hard for them to get around. Right? If they can get around, we don't make it hard. We don't segment our networks well. We don't separate tiers and have security in between them. If they can get around, we don't make it hard to get at our data. So we don't put, in the ERP, we don't put finance data in one data set. I'll just say data set because it's a word everybody understands. We don't put ordering data in another one. We don't put shipment data in a third one, yada, yada. Put it all in one, right? We don't separate app tier, web tier, database tier. We don't segment those guys. So it's easy to get to all of our stuff. If they can get to our stuff, we don't make it hard to use it. How many people we know don't encrypt data at rest? A lot. We don't make it hard for them to use it. And then if they don't belong, we don't make it hard for them to get out. We let them get out the same path they got in. We don't make them find a new path.
You have already gone so many more levels deep than I would have. I'm not a cybersecurity professional, but wow, you've already gone so many more levels deep than I would have expected. And you may not have been done yet.
Yeah. And then, so I have two more. So once we close the door behind them, we don't make it hard for them to get out. And if they can get out, we don't make it hard for them to take a payload. So whether it's a payload so I can get to your stuff and I grab a data set of social security numbers and you close the door behind me. Now I got to find my way out. Let's say I can do that. In order to go back out, I have to put that in something. Either transactionally, I have to set up a mode to send those one transaction at a time, or grab that data set and store it on something so I can take it with me or send it to somebody. I don't make that send capable. I don't put something in place so when I send that, I can't take that data set with me.
Yeah, right.
It's blocked. Okay. So there are tools for doing this kind of thing for sure.
Now, as it relates to Hemosource, how do you implement this sort of knowledge in order to create better business outcomes, like you were talking about? You and I were speaking earlier about, creating a more profitable and efficient business. So how do you implement this sort of information in order to deploy effective, let's say, programs for your clients?
Are you talking on the cyber side or otherwise?
Yeah. So how does this help, let's say, providers manage their business better?
So the secret, so as you can know from my background, I have a lot of experience in healthcare technology. And the balance is always, you have to have enough security so you're not at risk, but not so much that they can't do their job. And if you ask 100 physicians if they could have one thing, what would it be? And 99 would say more time with patients. Mm-hmm. The other guy is probably a neuroradiologist. He doesn't see patients anyway. Is to still allow them to see patients and then to put things in place so they're not spending a lot of time doing background, redundant administrative tasks. There's that word again.
Yeah.
That takes up their time that could be used to see patients. So here's a thing we did at Dignity Health is we implemented, so the thing that most people in the healthcare world are worried about is disclosure of PHI, right? Mm-hmm. Protected health information. They're also worried about privacy controlled information, but not as much as PHI. And they'd like to have an assistant come and log the doc into a console, something where you can sit down and read the patient record before they walk in. Mm-hmm. Problem with that, most of those consoles are in a public area where people are coming and going, especially in a large hospital. And that's a very big PHI concern. They could do it in their office, but then they'd have to send it to them. And then they have to, and if they do it in their office and they log in their office, and then they have to log out in their office, then they have to go in the patient room and log back in so they can look at it there. And you can see all of that takes time. Mm-hmm. And that's time they're not seeing a patient.
Which 99% of them want.
Yeah. So the thing that we did is we implemented a card-based scan that they would scan when they walk in the room, they would read it, they would scan when they walk out, and it would log them off of that system. Mm-hmm. And they go in the patient room, they'd scan it to log in, so they don't have to spend any time typing, they scan it, all comes up.
Oh, okay.
And not only that, but we made it smart enough to know, now these days they'd say, that's AI. We made it smart enough so that if I'm seeing you for your left ankle, to use an orthopedic example, mm-hmm. it brings up all the case notes and patient notes for the thing that we're seeing you for today, which is put in at the time the appointment is made by the people who make the appointments. Mm-hmm. So it's taking all the redundant administrative functions away from the physician having to chase them and just presenting to them and laid out and logs you on. So single sign on, right? And it uses his or her thumbprint and the card, so it's two-factor. If there's images, it links automatically to the imaging system. If there is, and that include MRI, X-ray, whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. If there was medications involved, it brings up the medication plan. So it's all right there. And because it's two-factor authentication, they know it's secure because they know it hasn't been breached. It's something you are, your thumbprint, and something you have, your key card. And they got to have the key card anyway to get into and out of the hospital, mm-hmm. right? So integrating those systems so that they talk to each other via secure tunnel is the thing that, you can see, first of all, it makes the business more effective and efficient because they can see more patients and spend more time. It makes the patient happier because the doc can spend more time with them. It makes the physician happier. It's more secure. And because you have a machine doing the work rather than the highly paid physician doing the work, it makes the company more profitable.
Mm-hmm. So as we're talking about HemaSource, just to dive into that a little bit more, I'd love to hear about your ideal clients, the problems that you're solving for them, and really what makes your approach at HemaSource unique.
The thing that our customers. So I divide the world into two kinds of people. Customers, that's people who pay money for our service. Clients is the other team members at HemaSource for whom we provide services, and I provide services to both. What the customers care about is that they get the right supplies in the right number of the right kind when and where they need it. Not too much and not too little. Because too much, they don't have a place to put it. Too little, they have to shut down because they don't have supplies. Mm-hmm. And my job is to build systems and processes to make sure that happens. Now, we have warehouses, which is the majority of our employees are warehouse employees. Where the warehouse employees are concerned, it has to be 100% mistake proof. And if you rely, and our warehouses are huge, 150 to 175,000 square feet. So there's people crawling all over these warehouses, and they operate off of an RF gun. And we need to send the instructions to them to the gun so they can't make a mistake. Mm-hmm. Secondly, we have to put fail safes on the gun that won't allow them to deviate from the work they're supposed to do. Because you don't want a warehouse worker remembering that they have to grab this thing and do it that way, and grab that thing and do it the other way. We don't want them to remember that because there's too much going on and they're moving too rapidly. We want them to look at the gun. They say, pick 10 boxes of this, scan 10 boxes. If they scan one and try to scan it 10 times, see, you're not allowed to do that. You have to scan all 10 boxes. So we have to put that fail safe in there to say, and so we have in our license plates and barcodes, we have a checksum. So if they're supposed to pick 10 boxes and they try to scan one box 10 times and then just grab 10, they can't do that. And the reason we don't want to do that because sometimes they grab 9, sometimes they grab 11 because they're in a hurry, because they're warehouse workers, because that's their job to be in a hurry. So, and we have to make sure that those instructions can't be manipulated or intercepted. Mm-hmm. The same thing applies to, we do 2,100 shipments a day, right? And so out of our 4 warehouses, mm-hmm. we have to make sure that every one of those shipments gets back into the ERP so we can invoice it, because we can't get paid. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean you can get shipments out the door. You can't get paid for them. Is to make sure that those invoices can go out automatically and that we don't have to hire an army of people to process them. And that if we have exceptions for them, we have exception handling in there that can notice the things that don't fit, mm-hmm. and either deal with it or report it to somebody that can deal with it right away, which should be only this big. Okay, so I can tell you, when I first came here, we had between 125 and 150 of those every day that had to be manually handled. Mm. And today we have between 3 and 5 every day.
Wow.
So, the proof is in the pudding. This is where we took automation. We made the machine do most of the work. And the things that it couldn't do, we let a human think about that and figure it out. Mm-hmm. And it went from this big. It's hard to do this with this camera because it's backwards.
Right.
It went from this big to just this big.
Gotcha.
In less than 3 years.
Wow. So that's unbelievable. I mean, the just how much that shakes up healthcare. And obviously it's very mm-hmm. fragmented. I have no idea what I'm paying. I have no idea who's paying it. But the impact of that is remarkable. So for HemaSource, what technological innovations are on the horizon? I mean, you've explained a lot about how AI is going to be shaking this up, but what sorts of innovations are on the horizon that you're really excited about?
So the things that I think that are going to help are things that I'd like to see. I'll stick a vision statement in here a little bit. If I'm looking, and we'll start kind of at the high end of the chain, which is a large hospital, what I'd like to see every large hospital have is I'd like to see, first of all, instead of giving me 29 pieces of paper when I'm admitted, right? Store that somewhere and give me access to it on my phone. And then I want to download an app that shows red dots on the floor like a Google Maps for a hospital.
Oh, my goodness.
Instead of having the person in admissions tell me, you go down this hallway and there'll be some elevators. You go down this hallway a quarter of a mile and there'll be some elevators on the left. You take that up to the 7th floor. When you come out of the elevators, turn around and go back the other way. walk 5 down there, and then take another set of elevators up, then come back this way, and then you'll find it. Why don't we have an
You're
app
trying to build
that
this
has all of
into
that
your
in it?
software solutions?
What's that?
You're building this into your software solution?
No, we are not building this. This is what I would like somebody to build.
Okay.
The stuff that we're building, I can tell you, is we're going to look to commercialize, but I would like to see that, because how hard is it to get around hospitals? It's impossible to find your way around hospitals. That's what I want to see in hospitals. I'll give you vision number 2 is when I go to my primary care physician and she gives me an order to go get an x-ray, I want that order to automatically go over to the x-ray machine, whether it's part of her system or not. So when I go over to the imaging company, they already know what pictures they're supposed to take. And that as soon as they're done, they go back to her and she gets an alert that says, hey, your x-rays are ready. So by the time I get an appointment to go back to her to get my x-rays reviewed, she already has seen it.
Wow. Okay.
And she looks at it and she says, oh, I can't deal with this. You need to go to orthopedics. So she goes and she types, so I'm talking to my primary care physician. And she says, I'm going to give you an order to go to orthopedics. Who's your ortho? She sends it over there. The image automatically goes. Her assessment, all of her patient notes already go. So if they're all in the same hospital, that works today. But if any one of those people is in the same hospital, it doesn't work, we're shit. Now you probably have to edit that piece out. But I wanted to go over there if it's not in the same system. And so when I arrive, when I call to make the appointment, and by the way, it gives an alert to the people making the appointment who calls me instead of me having to call and go through their auto attendant. I make my appointment and they already know what my physician's notes are, when it happened, what her assessment was. They already have all the imaging we've taken, and they can maybe write an order if they need additional imaging before I ever make the appointment, and they can tell me about that.
Wow.
And so when I walk in there, and by the way, the single sign-on thing that we invented at Dignity Health, the doc has that. So the minute I show up for the appointment, he just scans a pad on the outside, and the machine inside the room, not in the hallway where you're subject to PHI, lights up with all the stuff I just described.
So what you're describing is a seamless healthcare experience.
Absolutely.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. So, I mean, wow. I don't know how someone like yourself, or really anybody, develops those sorts of instincts and muscles to, or let's say, cognitive muscles, let's say, to fire on all cylinders. What was it like transitioning from the Marines into the private sector, where your mission was readiness? Like, did that change a whole lot when you went into the private sector as a security professional?
Not really. So when I transitioned to the corporate sector in 1995, cybersecurity wasn't a thing. The only people doing offensive cyberspace operations was the federal government and state-sponsored actors, and they weren't attacking businesses. They were attacking other governments and criminal organizations.
Right. Okay.
So that evolved over time, and we've had to evolve with it. And I will tell you, my opinion is that the worst actors along these lines, which is arguably Russia, North Korea, China, and Iran, that they have tens of thousands of people engaged in offensive cyberspace operations for profit. And I think the reason they do that is because their dictatorial autocratic governments are inefficient, and they can't do all the things they want to if they don't have extra money coming in. So they're engaged in what's effectively organized crime in order to bolster their economies. And secondly, their intelligence operations are not what they should be, and their economies are not what they should be, and they can't afford to make their intelligence operations what they should be. So they're engaged in organized crime to shore up the budget for their clandestine operations. Now,
that is such a clear way to put it. Nobody's ever put it like that for me before.
That's my opinion. I don't have direct data that says, yeah, that's what they're doing, but it sure smells that way.
Right. Well, on On the note, just jumping back a little bit, the reason why I invited you on the show is because obviously you've had tons of accomplishments throughout your career. And I'd love to hear a little bit about big wins that really you feel defined your career before you got to HemaSource.
Well, I've had 3 exits before this. So we were able to build companies that people wanted to buy. So that's one. And when you do a turnaround, the price of the company often lags its value because the price hasn't caught up. People don't realize that, it's not till you start taking everybody's market share that somebody figures out they got to acquire you to defend the share that they already have. Mm-hmm. When you are inefficient and don't have high performing operations, it's hard to take market share from people because what are you selling? A better mousetrap. They come to you and say, what I'm going to do for you is going to be lower cost. It's going to be higher quality. You're going to have better visibility, and we're going to give you a higher guarantee of execution. Because we do, and we have metrics that back that up. Example is at HemaSource, when I first got here, our main system, which processes orders and builds shipments, was down probably twice a week. And it hasn't been down. We haven't had an outage since November.
Are you serious?
So,
wait, this was
that's a huge win.
Beforehand? You cut out a bit. Was this twice a week or twice a month?
Twice a week.
Yikes. So what's that done for the business then?
Well, it's, again, like I told you that, and another thing that we did, I would go, this is HemaSource, but maybe not before HemaSource. One of the things that I learned was, how to organize people around problems to get things done before getting here. And was in a lot of companies where systems didn't work. It makes it hard to sell your services or your systems or your software if it doesn't work, right? Because people are in business to make money. If they can't process transactions or get stuff done, they can't make money. And if they're relying on your systems to do that and they can't, then you're not making their business better, you're making their business worse. Mm-hmm. Right? You're slowing down their business fundamentally. So, some of the big wins I had is that, like at corporate systems, same thing we did here. We implemented automated testing, and that allowed us to cut $3.5 million a year in development costs out, in a year. Mm-hmm. We implemented a standardized requirements definition process that was based on PMI's business definition philosophy.
I hear
so everybody was doing
those sorts of defined goals aren't as common as someone like myself might think within organizations.
They're absent in most organizations.
Absent.
I think you're being very generous saying that they are not as common. No, most organizations don't have them. Mm. I mean, that's to give a pitch. The reason they hire me is because they can't figure out how to get this stuff done.
It looks like that, from your background. That's why I was really excited to talk to you. It's like, there are intractable problems here. And I was fascinated by the fact that, coming from this military background, it sounds like, you just know how to get things done. And and that's really wonderful. I am curious because I know that we're kind of running up on time here. And I probably want to have you back on to ask about all sorts of things like, I don't know, the Roman Republic. You brought that up. It's not me bringing that up, but anytime that I talk to top professionals, they have wisdom that they've gained from wide-ranging experience that you just don't get from textbooks. So do you have any wisdom like that you could share with our audience?
Well, so this is going to seem trite, but it really isn't. Seek first to understand and then be understood. Because all of us tech guys, we think we got all the answers. Until you understand the full nature of the problem you're trying to solve, you might miss something. So make sure you listen. And don't presume because you knew how something operated somewhere else that you know how it operates here. Because it might be different. Every business is different. Okay? Make sure you figure out how it actually works here before you assume that they're doing it wrong. I've seen a lot of that in the community recently. make sure that when things go wrong, that you do a full root cause analysis, which is missing from many places, which is what happened, why did it happen, and what are we going to do to make sure it never happens again ever. And I'll give you an example. The classic case when something goes down, let's just reboot the server, right? Or somebody's trying to hack in, let's reboot the server, throw everybody out. If you don't put something in place, if you don't know why it happened, you don't know exactly what went wrong at the engineering level. If you don't put something in place to make sure it never happens again ever, as soon as that series of circumstances happens again, you're going to have the same problem. And when you solve the same problem more than once, that's rework, and rework is waste. And no company in the world wants to say, "Oh, let's just be wasteful. No worries." And you know, then the final thing I'd say is that the secret to high speed, high quality execution and delivery is automation. No matter how good we are as humans, there's always things that get in our way. We forget stuff. We leave stuff out. We didn't know something was there. We got busy. We got distracted. The machine never gets anything. It doesn't. It just does what you tell it. And if you tell it to do all those things, it will never miss as long as you tell it to do all those things. Now, it's not easy to tell it to do all those things. Don't get me wrong, right? If it's easy, everybody would be doing it, right? And the caution I would give is make sure you understand what AI machine learning can and cannot do for you. Mm-hmm. Because people say, "Oh, I'm just going to go ask ChatGPT to write code to do this." Well, what happens if you just ask ChatGPT to do code to do something that's proprietary to where you run your company? Now the whole world has access to your proprietary thought process. So maybe it's fast, maybe it's not, and maybe it'll work, and maybe it isn't. Mm-hmm. But you got to give it to OpenAI for OpenAI to go out into its world and find something that does what you think it's going to do. And everybody's making a big deal about OpenAI and ChatGPT. We've had tools like this forever. I remember doing this in DBase 4 in 1989, right? So DBase 4 had a utility. You would fill in some basic fields and it would write all the code for you. Then you had to go and make it do what you really wanted it to do. So, make sure you understand on the AI side what it can and can't do and how much of your own effort is going to have to go into making it do what you really want it to do. Because I know people that were training Watson. I don't remember when Watson first came out. Let's pick around 2014. Training Watson in 2014, and now they're training IBM's version of OpenAI. Mm-hmm. Did you ever finish training Watson?
What a shift. Yeah, I know, right? My goodness.
You know what I'm saying? Are you even there? So
what happened to
any
Watson?
kind of automation is going to require a lot of attention by your people, mm-hmm. whether it's AI, automated testing, and they're going to have to know your business processes. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to work on it, and it's going to use a lot of time. This kind of malarkey that's out there in the world that says, "Oh, just put it up in OpenAI to solve your problems," is a load of hooey.
That's great advice. And before we jump off, I'm really curious. You've done so much volunteering with nonprofits. It might be mm-hmm. distributing medical devices. I believe refurbishing and distributing medical devices to impoverished areas, but also funding the education of children of Marines, the 10-10-10 project for advising startups. So, I'd love to hear about what determines where you'll volunteer your time.
So I try to pick things that have an immediate and tangible impact. And I'm going to pick on the climate change knuckleheads for a minute. Science will tell you the climate has always been changing and will always be changing. This is a fact. It is indisputable. If I can spend a Saturday morning, I'll use Project Cure as an example. If I can spend a Saturday morning repairing medical devices that have been discarded by a hospital because it's not worth their time to repair it, because I have that skill set, and it means that I can put a centrifuge I know will work in a lab in a third world country that has an Ebola problem. That's tangible impact.
Yeah.
I know if I repair this thing, I know who's going to get it, and I know what their needs are.
Mm.
And maybe I don't talk to them directly, but I talk to the people who talk to them directly. So I'm 1 degree removed from people say, wow, we really need 3 more centrifuges. So I go through this big ass warehouse, and I get these things and I put them in a shopping cart, and I spend Saturday with my soldering iron and with my testers, and I make this thing work.
Yeah.
Right. And then I, pack it in a box so that it will be secured and won't get busted on the way there. And I know that a month from now, they're going to get a centrifuge that actually works.
Wait,
that's tangible.
Do that?
What's that?
You personally do that?
Yes.
That's amazing. Wow. That's unbelievable.
Yes. So, and I don't do it here because there's no place to do it here, but I did it for 9 years in Phoenix. Mm-hmm. Another thing of that is, as you know, the state of some education in this country has become very scary. Mm-hmm. It's a bigger emphasis on, less emphasis on reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? And more emphasis on gender fluidity, which side of the political aisle you stand on, and who you should hate and why. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, it's just one man's opinion, right? Opinions are free advice is worth what you pay for it. I grew up, I had Catholic school, right? So it was very much reading, writing, and arithmetic, history.
Same here.
Right?
Yep.
That's right. Yeah, so you know the drill.
Yeah.
So when the local Christian high school was going to go under because it couldn't make ends meet, our church bought it. We put together a capital campaign. We bought the high school and refurbished it because it was falling down. And so, we donate a lot of money to that because unequivocally the teachers there are first rate.
Yeah,
they are, and they focus on every kid has to leave there being a tutu speaker in another language besides English.
Wow.
Robotics, all kinds of math, including advanced calculus. So they had 6 kids last year got national merit scholarships based on their performance in AP calculus as seniors in high school. They focus on character and looking out for each other. So all the kids are organized into families, and your family is responsible for developing you at all levels. And my wife and I both volunteer our time there because that's producing the kind of kids that we believe society needs. So that's direct. I can put and I know them. I can put my finger on that. One of the things when we did 10-10-10 for healthcare was healthcare has great innovation in some technologies. Like every year they come out with a new MRI machine that has 100,000 more frames per second than the one from last year, right? But when they described that thing I described to you where I had a vision of where it would go, they still can't do that. Common Spirit Health just divested some of its assets to form Common Spirit from what used to be Dignity Health. And now they're no longer linked to Centura. So I go to Common Spirit, I can't use the Centura app to know where my records are. Just recently, in the last year. Mm-hmm. The fact we haven't solved that problem is beyond me, right? And the fact that doctors' offices still want you to send documents via a fax. I'm like, who has a fax anymore? Right? Don't you guys have a secure portal where I can upload this? No, we don't really have that running yet.
And, maybe some of the buttons don't work or something. I worked in healthcare for about 10 years. My parents ran a medical office. So, pretty much everything except for drawing blood, my sister she handled that. She was much better at that. But yeah, these inefficiencies in healthcare, I can't believe just in the past year, still we're not seeing the sorts of improvements that I would have imagined were, on the immediate horizon 20 years ago when I was doing this.
Yeah. Well, I will say though, in fairness, they're way better at this than they were 5 years ago. But there's still a lot of gaps.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I volunteered for 10-10-10 for healthcare was because I thought the focus would be on that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And in the end, I don't think it ended up going anywhere because I think it was on things people were emotional about and not things that would have a tangible impact. Mm-hmm. Something you could touch in the next 3 years.
Exactly.
It's like one thing was the thing that drew the most attention was childhood obesity. What are you going to build in the next year that's going to turn that around? Well, the focus of things people wanted to do, and I did a lot of the research on that, and did a lot of the what they call I forget what they call, but somebody who was an expert in how health systems work on various problems. There was a name for it. That they use it 10-10-10. But the thing that we really needed to do was come up with a way, and this is what the research showed, come up with a way. Everybody says we know we need to educate children of parents below a certain income level better on nutrition. Those people have been educated on bettering their nutrition as long as I've been alive and until the cows come home. But there's no solution for them to actually execute it. Why do the people below a certain income, why are a lot of their children so overweight? It's because those poor people are working their ass off and they don't have time to pick and choose all these these hard to make dishes that don't have any sugar in them and that are nutritious enough. And they don't have, because they're all working 2 jobs, they don't have time to make sure their kids get the regular exercise. Nobody wants to focus on that. I don't have the answer. Don't get me wrong.
Right. And that's what I'm thinking of. Like, what's the answer? And also, what's that answer that motivates a competent person like yourself to jump in and say, okay, maybe in the next 3 years, we actually could have a tangible impact on this?
Yeah. So, I worked for a nonprofit called, I don't remember what it was called once, as a board member. And it was focused on families with first-time college students. And it was a goal to help them succeed, make sure they graduated. Now, I left there because they went from that to trying to find ways to get more women of color into college, which I have nothing against trying to get more women of color into college, but there are tens of thousands of organizations doing that. There's only one organization doing the effort to say, if your family has a first-time college student, these are the tools you need to have. And we're going to put together, the purpose of this is we're doing this as volunteers to try to make mentors available to you. So these are the things you got to work for. And we're going to sit with you and tell you how to do it. The same thing needs to be done, in my opinion, with childhood obesity. Okay, we're going to put together a network of people that can pick your kid up at home and take him to a place where a Boys and Girls Club, where he or she is going to get 2 hours of continuous motion. And we're going to have a nutritionist, somebody that'll do your shopping for you as a volunteer to make sure you have that you have all the ingredients you need to cook healthy, low sugar meals.
Oh, kind of like those delivery services that just bring that to your door and make that.
Yeah, but those are commercial entities that are very expensive.
Yeah,
low-income families can't afford. Right?
Like Blue Apron or something like that?
Yeah, HelloFresh. There's 4 or 5 of them.
Yep.
Yeah, Blue Apron's another one. And I got to apologize.
That's my barrier doing it, because I think about all the added costs, and that's actually a really good point. That is my barrier to doing that.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to push 10-10-10 to do, is to build an organization of volunteers. We do this at our church, right? So one of our reach ministries at our church is they have people who are struggling to get healthy meals on the table. They have a network of volunteers that puts a meal plan together, takes you and helps you, and will do your shopping, right? And the church contributes some money to that if you can afford it. And then make sure the right ingredients are there with the recipes laid out in a portion. And some people even go and do initial meal prep so that you can just cook it.
Wow.
So, these are things where we as a society have to help ourselves. We want to look to the government and say the government needs to come out. The government can't find its ass from a hole in the ground. Right. So if we're going to solve these thorny problems, we're going to have to do it ourselves as a society that cares about our fellow humans. And those things, why I dedicate time to those things, because they actually are doing something that makes an impact.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you and your wife for engaging in those sorts of activities. And, whether it's the nonprofit world or commercial world, I mean, you have a huge track record of producing great results, really transforming businesses, making them more profitable. So if our listeners want to learn more about you, maybe contact you for advisory services, or, on the horizon, talk to you about, maybe there's executive positions opening up years down the road. Where can our listeners learn more about you and maybe take advantage of some of your insights?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best way.
Yeah. But
preface it with, I saw this podcast, or I heard about this through this news. How can we learn more? But usually when people contact me, they're trying to sell me something.
Yeah.
And the insinuation might be, and I get most of these are cold calls, right? You got to make calls, you got to fill a funnel. I've been in the sales gig. But they can reach me through LinkedIn. And if you're anybody, I'll tell you, anybody who reaches out to me through LinkedIn that's asking for help on something, I'll always respond to that. I don't respond to the cold calls to sell me services because I get so many of them, I just don't have time to respond to them all.
Really? The C-suite? They get cold calls all the time, especially after COVID? Oh my goodness. Your cell phones aren't safe anymore. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. I get lots of cold calls on the phone. I don't answer those either.
See, this is why I choose to, just not get promoted. Much easier for me. I just don't want cold calls. But hey, Jonathan, it's been great having you on the show. I'd love to have you back on sometime. But until next time, thanks for taking the time, and we'll plan on this again maybe later this year or next.
Yeah, sure. Happy to help. Thanks for asking. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. You take care. To all our listeners, stick around. We'll do a quick recap. Thanks for listening, everybody. We covered a lot of ground today. Just to recap a few key points. Jonathan drew from his extensive track record to outline some of the major challenges in creating large-scale transformations. His wide-ranging experience across industries, combined with his military background, have taught him the value of adaptive leadership, balancing opposing opinions, and ultimately reserving the executive mindset needed to push change initiatives forward. He shared his vision for a seamless healthcare experience, talked about other technological trends on the horizon, and he was kind enough to share a bit about the impactful work he does with nonprofits. Jonathan is truly an exceptional business leader. He has a stellar track record. For our listeners seeking robust consultation or considering large-scale technological transformations, I encourage you to reach out to him before making your next moves. You can find his LinkedIn profile below. Well, that's all for now. Until next time, folks, I'm Andrew Rosenblum. You're listening to the Winners in Business podcast brought to you by Beachfront Custom Development. See you next time.